Hello and welcome also from the product management side to today's What's New session. So in today's session, we will be covering product innovations and updates, covering the first quarter of 2024. So meaning features delivered in January, February, and March this year. And I have a good number of colleagues with me here together sharing these news. So let's have a brief look at the agenda. So first we will start like always with some general product updates we have to share, then updates in the data integration area as well as in the modeling area, and further updates in other areas of the system. And at the end we will give you an outlook on what to expect the next quarter or the next quarters for the product features to come. So let's directly jump into the first section here with general product updates, and this time it is about updates on the data center area. So for the Google data centers, EU30, IN30 and US30, we now enabled the BW Bridge component, so that optional component is now also available in these Google data centers, and therefore extending our coverage with Datasphere and the additional optional features here also across the Google landscape. If you're interested in the other data centers available, check out the Discovery Center linked here on the page, and you will find all available data centers for Datasphere. With that, let's move on to the integration area. So I have one topic I want to share with you, and that is about configuring real-time or delta intervals for the replication flow. That was one of the features of the first release of this year of 2024-01. And what this feature enhancement basically does is lets you configure the delta load interval for replication flows based on your needs. So previously this was fixed to 60 minutes or 1 hour, and now the value can be set from kind of near real-time replication, if you set that value to 0, up to 24 hours as a maximum delta load interval, so meaning you would load once a day. And the default value will stay with 60 minutes or 1 hour, and otherwise you can configure that to a setting which you like. So let's directly jump into the system to also check out how that looks like in the software. So if we're here on the data builder and check out one of my replication flows here, what you will see on the right hand side in the properties panel is this additional area, delta load interval, which we added, and you see here exactly the mentioned 1 hour default value. You can set that to 0 or 24 or add any number in minutes here to the load interval to adjust it to your needs. And that's already about it from my point of view, for my first part. And I would like to hand it over to Hannes to get us some more innovations on the data integration side. Hannes, over to you.
This user story is more an information and actually a new feature. We have changed the highest scheduling frequency to 10 minutes. It was an hour before, so now whatever you can schedule, doesn't matter whether it's a remote table snapshot, a data flow, or a task chain, or whatever, you can now schedule it up to a frequency of 10 minutes. And that's basically it for the story. Obviously, you have to be aware that if you schedule it higher, the resource consumption on your HANA database will be higher, and that is what you have to consider. This user story has enhanced the view analyzer to generate HANA SQL Analyzer or Planvis files, so that you do no longer need to go into the Database Explorer to get those created. Now you can actually do it in the software and download them. So how does that work? You go into the data integration monitor of the views, where the typical view analyzer is. You pick a view, and normally you were able to start the view analyzer by start view analyzer button under data persistency. And now you have a third option besides the with or without memory. You can now run it with generate SQL analyzer plan file. If we do it, it will schedule a run and it will execute the run. Now we have to wait a little. It's completed. Good. As soon as it's completed, I can basically refresh my task messages. I do still see the entities as normal, but for this feature, we need to go into the task log, and we here see a line where it says, okay, we have received, or we have prepared a Planvis file for you to download, and you have the little download icon which you can push, and then it will bring you a Planvis file. And that file can then be opened either in a Eclipse with HANA Studio basically, or in a Visual Studio Code, where you just basically pick and open the file, and it will allow you more detailed analysis of the Planvis, or of the execution of the SQL statement in the view. This is just for the people who really know and want to really understand how the HANA will process your view, to have a detailed look inside of the HANA execution processes and the different steps that will be done. Yes, so a nice and easy way to get the Planvis files for export users. Thanks a lot. This user story will bring the support for input parameters to remote tables, meaning that remote tables can now be created on objects which carry input supports. This is currently only available for SQL views, but we will extend this, and the plan is to work on calculation views as well as CDS views with input parameter. So in general, what you see will and should work for all objects supported with input parameters, and it should look all alike. So let's have a look how this will look like in the system. If I am in a HANA database and I have a view, and in this case I created a view which is called my param view, so my parameter view, and if I click on the create statement, it will simply give me the statement. This looks very ugly to see because it's all in one line, but I have formatted it for you so that you can more easily read it. So basically we have test fields here in all different data types, but the important part is basically that we have an input parameter which is used to select on the my integer field. And the input parameter is called PAR in our view. So it has an in parameter as integer, which selects against this input field. And that view is available in my HANA database. And I have loaded this, or you can load this by import remote tables against the connection. So here is the my param view. I have already done this. And if we're looking at this now in the remote table editor in the data builder, we will now see, okay, this is the my param view. Out of my connection, we have just seen the access is still remote, so it stays as a remote access. And this looks the same, except that we have a new section here, input parameters, and it shows me the list of parameters and their data types. This is basically it on the data builder, but interesting comes the part of querying it. So if we go back out of this remote table and we are going to create a graphical view, I can take the remote table, drag it in as a source, and it will immediately ask me what to do with the input parameter that is there. The input parameter is called par, and I can either give it a set value, that means the fixed value that we will always use, or I can map it to an input parameter. If I have already input parameters in my views, I could choose those, or if I don't have input parameters in my views, I can create a new input parameter in my view. Let's do this, for example, and this will now show us that we have a new input parameter that is available in our view. So it has created one with the same exact same name that now becomes available as we have the input parameter feature already for some time. And now you will have to set the input parameter in order to query data. And this will even work in the preview. You see, if you preview, it will ask me, and if I enter a 1, it should go the normal process of warning me that the data isn't in the system. Still want to view it, and it shows me I get one record with, and you see this little asterisk of the input parameter, which is mandatory, with 1. And if I click on this green bar, I am able to reset the input parameter test for a different set of values or different input parameter value. And with that, you can then basically query, and you will see now we get actually 2 lines with the integer field 2. And this is how we will support input parameters on remote entities, which are made available as remote tables. This new feature allows us to update the metadata of remote tables, not one by one, but in a bulk fashion. Previously, you had to go into the remote table and refresh the data. So actually, let's do this once. So previously, once you were in a remote table, you had the refresh button that allowed you to pull a fresh set of metadata and compare it to what we have and see if there were any changes. But if you had a large system and, for example, did a update on your source system and you wanted to check a large quantity of table at the same time, this was kind of cumbersome by going into each table, refreshing it, and to get the new set of metadata to it. So what we have built instead now as a mass feature is here under where also the import of remote table is the validate remote tables, where you can select a connection. Let's take the Northwind connection and select one or more tables to pull and validate them. It will now go into the background and refresh the metadata for each set of tables and pull those out. And you see here, like the products we had, as it's already pulled, is it will then show you, okay, there are changes to deploy or there are some other problems. And here in the runtime category, I think it's because I have replicated the data and there are structural changes to be brought in. But the problem is that there's already a filled table and it's probably incompatible changes. So I need to deal with those problems. But with that, with the selection, you see it has modification. I can bring it. But as there's still a runtime error, and if I try to deploy it, I will get my actual error that there is replicated data which I need to remove in order to adjust the runtime table so that I can then basically save the new structure, and then I need to re-replicate the data if necessary in order to solve this problem. But the idea really is that you can now, instead of doing it singly, you can do it in a mass fashion, and you can then basically sort, for example, for changes that need to be deployed, or if there are, well, multiple ones with runtime errors. Let's check. There are multiple ones with runtime errors, basically, that I have replicated now. And these I need to address in order to keep the data in sync between Datasphere and the source system. That is what our new mass validation feature brings us. And you basically, just select your scope and validate those. With this user story, the transformation flow has now learned the SQL and SQL script transformation, and with that caught up to what the view builder was already capable of doing. So you can now create your view transformations in SQL and SQL script by creating them directly, or you have one other beneficial feature. You can convert graphical view transformations into SQL view transformations and then continue editing there. Obviously, be careful. This is a non-reversible fact. We cannot convert from SQL to the graphical view builder. That is not possible currently. So how does that look in the system? In order to show you, I have created a transformation flow already that is currently a graphical one. So if we look in here, we see that's a join plus a little bit of projections on tables, and they are actually one of those is Delta enabled as well. But now I can go in and use the SQL button here, and it will warn me that it's non-reversible change. And if I do so, it will translate me my graphical view into a SQL view. It will do the right selects. Obviously, it knows that it has to go to the underscore delta item. And yeah, I'm getting a validatable, so functional SQL statement out of that. And then where I could make changes, for example, if I want to rename this, sorry, not inside the quotes, but and simply if I'm more comfortable or need to do more complex functionality, which I can't do in the graphical view builder, I can do them here. And similarly to the view builder, you have the switch up here, so you can also switch to the SQL script version. We will then do this, and we also have to rewrite the code. And instead, we have to return, and we have to add a semicolon. And if I validate this, I can do this as well. And that is how I can easily edit these SQL and SQL script. And just for completeness, to show if you create a new transformation flow, yes, you can directly create the SQL view without using the graphical views before and switch forth and back as you're familiar with also in the view builder. And that is the new feature of SQL and SQL script transformation in the transformation flow. With this user story, we have introduced a run mode for views and view persistencies and transformation flows. And you can basically switch between the performance optimized mode, that is what we used to have and are still using as standard execution when you create one, and what we call a memory optimized mode, where we're basically giving the HANA execution engine the hint to use intermediate or store intermediate results on disk. So it lowers theoretically the consumption, the memory consumption for running one of those tasks. This is especially helpful when you run very large statements, complex statements, which a lot of intermediate results and having memory issues or out of memory problems. That is where the setting can help. Will it help a lot when you just have a standard one-to-one select with, I don't know, in my demo case, we'll see 55,000 records? No, that's not really going to be a huge impact or benefit. It is slightly slower if the intermediate results have to go to disk instead of can stay in memory, because they obviously have to be pulled out for the next operation step again. So there's a little bit more read and write operations to the disk, which makes it slower. So it's either if you really, really need it because you're running out of memory, or if you can spare the time and want to save some of the additional compute power for other tasks. That's where this setting can help. So how does that look? If we are going into the data integration monitor, it's in views and in transformation flows. And by clicking on it, it's under settings. So under settings, you can run now in the performance optimized mode or in the memory mode, and you just need to switch it and it will use these options for the next run. And I have already done so. So I have 2 runs in here. The one run is, if you're looking into it, basically, if you're looking at this statement, the one run uses the hex to disk, and it uses only 0.02 gigabyte. And the other one I ran in the performance optimized mode, and you see we're missing the hint basically to use the hex disk. And but you see the memory consumption is, in my small data set, way too small to make any impact, because we're only using 0.02 gigabyte, and as well the runtimes in seconds is probably just rounding errors. So there's not much difference now in my example, but for a larger case, especially complex view where the view persistency runs for a while, it can help. And just for completeness reason, in the transformation flow, same thing. I'm sorry, here transformation flows. Let's go into a transformation flow. We have under settings, the same settings available. With this user story, we have introduced the nesting of task chains in task chains, or as we also can call it, we can now create meta chains. That means you can reuse and distribute basically the design of task chains across multiple areas, and especially if you're having large systems with large spaces, it becomes a lot more handleable because you have a more modular design where you have individual responsibilities, maybe individual layers, which you can then combine. And this is also the prerequisite work for us, as we're currently also working on the parts where we will allow sharing of task chains, and then with the combination of sharing, you will have the ability to build global task chains which go across spaces, which is not ready in this story, but it's the first step there. So how does that look like? In my system, I have set up 2 task chains, one basically to load the harmonization layer and one to load the reporting persistency so that I can cache my data for all of my email requests from SAC. And once I create a new task chain, I have and will see here the 2 chains, and then can simply drag and drop them like a normal regular task and just allow me to create task chains. They have the same rules in the sense of you can parallelize them, you can execute them sequentially without the all and any kind of collectors, so that you have the same options available as in the task chains for individual tasks. Now you can just basically have task chains in task chains. Let's deploy this. So it's deployed, and now let's start the chain. And as it runs, we can look at the monitor, and in the monitor, we will see the 2 individual task chains, and I also now see the start of the inner chain. You don't see directly the messages into the inner chain. You have to click on the view monitor button here in order to jump into the monitor of the individual chain. So by jumping in here, you basically then come to the run of the individual chains. And if you go to the task chains overview in general, you also see that they're both running. So they both showed as running, and they will prevent the double execution. So if you should enter meta chain into multiple ones, it will trigger. But for performance reasons, we also prevented, or we did not include the loop detection. That was very expensive, and somehow the user experience wasn't good, so it's currently not in there. You have to be careful not to build loops. It's not a damage, so it won't go into an endless loop. As both chains are running, If you're going into endless loop, the meta chain is still executing. That means if the inner chain would also execute the meta chain, the second call of the meta chain will fail because it says it's already running. So loops, even though they can be designed, they will not be run and execute. So they will cause an error. So be a little bit careful about not to design any loops in these meta chains.
In this user story, we're going to consume BW Bridge remote tables with and without Delta functionality. So as a new feature, the transformation flow is now capable of leveraging remote tables from the BW Bridge as source. For this, the BW Bridge space needs to have the remote table shared with the space where you want to build your transformation flow in, as you cannot build transformation flows in the BW Bridge space itself. So once you've shared it, you can use it inside of the transformation flow as source entity, and this provides us a better integration with the BW Bridge and obviously needs less redundant data storages and persistencies inside of a BW and Datasphere architecture. So how does that look like practically? I am in one of my spaces where I do have a standard DSO with changelog shared into my space from a bridge space. And if I create a new transformation flow, and I will use the graphical view designer to fill it in, it will show up here under show more. I can now see the BW Bridge table that I was not able to see beforehand, and I also see the little share symbol that shows me. If I drag it in, I can use it similarly to every local table we currently had, and by selecting it, I can also select between the active and Delta records from this table, so you have the same capabilities as you would have for a Delta enabled table, should the remote table support the Delta parts in Datasphere. Technically, it will work slightly different, so we're not using the watermark management as we do for local tables, but we're using the watermark management against the requests inside of the DSO of the BW Bridge. So technically in the background it's slightly different. For you it looks exactly the same, so there's no difference. Thank you. That's all for the use of the bridge tables in the transformation flows.
Thank you, Hannes, for all the details on these data integration topics. And let's move on to the modeling area. So first and foremost, we have a quite prominent feature delivery, which came in around end of January, early February, which is the folders feature in the repository explorer and the data builder. So basically allowing you to have your data artifacts structured in folders, and so you can now move artifacts to folders, have folders within folders, so using nesting, you can rename those, etc. So it's a flexible UI which we provide there with different filtering capabilities, a very rich search experience, and where you can now use all that inside the system. But let's directly jump into a short demo in the system. So I'm in my data builder area in one of my spaces where I created several folders here for different areas, so you can group that to your needs. I put a master data folder here and used within that also the nested folder capability to have another folder for product data specifically. You can use these breadcrumb navigations here to directly go one level up or all the way up to a different folder here. I grouped task chains and flows into separate folders, but you can do that as you like. An important feature here is this little filter icon. If you click on it, you get a filter pane on the left-hand side where you see on the one-hand side the structure of your existing folders you've used. Also, you can filter by artifact type, right? By status, if it's deployed, non-deployed. Objects, right? Shared, non-shared, or shared from or to my space, and also like what's exposed for consumption or others, change date, etc. So that's very helpful. If you don't need it, you simply can also close it again. On the other icons, there's no major change. I think the main one is here, this little icon where you can, if you highlight it, one or several artifacts, right, you get the move to icon here where you can decide where you want to move this item or multiple items to a particular folder. And also here the settings, column settings, because that's where you can select what kind of columns are shown in this table control, and also you can decide if the sequence, right, what comes first, last, etc. That can be all configured under the cogwheel here. And since it's the same control what we're using here, what's already used for quite some time in the repository explorer, you have the same kind of tile setup here, or table setup, which you're probably used to already from the repository explorer. And that's it from my side for this first feature. And let me hand it over to my colleagues on the modeling side, starting with Mona and other colleagues.
SAP Datasphere has started supporting the input parameters of remote entities originating from OpenSQL schema, but the default values of input parameters are not imported. Predefined default values of columns and columns which are designated as not null are captured and imported as well. It increases the flexibility and compatibility between Datasphere and OpenSQL schema. Parameterizing the SQL view is particularly helpful in anomaly detection, customer segment analysis, and time series analysis. A parameterized view is built with the support of respective table functions to make the view flexible enough to run the analysis based on the input. I will show the demo for the same shortly. Here I would like to show you the remote entities with corresponding input parameters and default values. This view has an input parameter called group number, and there is another table which has default value and not null settings. In both entities, these are coming from a remote source. We can visualize these artifacts shown here also in Database Explorer. Here is the customer profile data that I have. I would like to run my analysis in this data. It has customer details and their profile details in which how they are spending. First, I have created a table function. In this table function, I pass my group number. This table function uses the anomaly detection function, and I have created a view on top of this table function, and this view has an input parameter. The group number from the table function is same as the group number as an input over here. This is the input parameter that we are seeing it over here in the view. When I click for preview of my data, I feed in the group number. It would take a while to get the preview of the data. And here you see the data, and these are all the anomalies that are found based on the group number that we have fed in. We can create many such examples by using the input parameter by making the SQL view as an parameterized view.
Welcome to the demo of how we now show an inherited information in the analytic model. I'm going to show a number of smaller improvements that cumulatively have a good impact in understanding how your analytic model is working and what is configured. So you can see here we have a pretty typical analytic model. We have a number of measures and dimensions configured. If we start looking at these, we can immediately see there are new icons on some of the dimensions. So for instance, hierarchies or time dependency. And this is just giving you a quick insight into what's coming from those underlying entities. If I click into one of these as well, that information is propagated to the header. So again, it's easy to understand that, either the details or the overview. There's also additional and enhanced pop-ups available. So you can click on the details pop-up here, or if we look in the measures, we can get even more information. Here we see there's now a dynamic label that will either show the business name or technical name depending on the user's settings. I have it now set to show the business name. Another improvement is that you can now do multiple delete. So if you select multiple dimensions and click delete, it will just delete those three and you don't have to individually select them. And another improvement is that you have this used in section within measures. So we can very quickly see everywhere else that the gross amount is used in our analytic model and understand the relationships and dependencies. And that's the demo for the new inherited information that's displayed in the analytic model.
With the release 2024-01, we now give the ability to a modeler to assign more object types to a package. The new object types that can be assigned to a package directly from a modeling screen are data flows, intelligent lookups, replication flows, task chains, and transformation flows. A user with only the modeling privileges will not be able to manage the package or to create it, but from the relevant modeling screens would be able now to assign the object to the repository package. The expectation is that the package is already created in the space. If there is no package existing in the space, then the drop-down for packages would be empty, and it will not be possible for the modeler to select a package. Additionally, the action of assigning an object to a package is non-reversible for the modeler, which means that if a modeler assigns an object to a repository package, they will not be able to change the assignment through the modeling screen. This change needs to happen through the package management screen, which is only accessible to an administrator. Additionally, if a modeler assigns an object to a package, but the dependencies of that object do not resolve after the assignment of the object to the package, a warning sign would be shown on the modeling screen, but it will not be possible for the modeler to resolve the dependency or to change the assignment. This needs to happen again into the package management screen. We'll take a look at that example as well once we now shift to the product. So, what do we have as a setup? We have a few packages, a sales package, a sales master data package, and also a data flow package. I've created this specifically for our example today. Now the data flow package is empty at the moment. It does not have any required packages in its list. Now let's move to the object assignment to a package. I've created a data flow which uses a remote table sales orders, and it is a simple data flow that creates a copy of the sales orders from remote table into the local table. So it pushes the data into the local table. The most important thing that has changed after this release is that now there is a drop down here for you to select the packages. Once you select that, you'll see that all the packages in that space are now available for assignment. But before we do that, let's also now take a look at this object here. RT sales orders, which is the source object for our data flow, is part of P sales 1 package. Based on the package resolution, if we add this data flow to any other package other than P sales 1, then that target package needs to have P sales 1 as its required objects, right? So first up, we're not going to do that because we saw that our data flow package does not have any dependency. What I'm going to do as a modeler now is I'm just going to assign it to the data flow package. It will tell me that I have made the assignment. I need to save and confirm and validate this change. I'm going to save it. I know that there will be validation issues after this assignment happens, but that's exactly the test that we are going to perform now. The warning has now changed and it tells me that the dependencies of object sales sorters cannot be resolved in package data flow package. As expected, because we have not added psales1 as a required package for data flow package. I'm going to go into it and into the list of objects, and it tells me that the object RT sales orders is not specified as a required package because it is part of psales. Fair enough. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete this from the list here, and I'm going to save it. Now I'm going to add the psales1 as a required package in a bid to resolve the dependency whenever my modeler adds an object that requires an object from psales1. Going back to my data flow view, this time I'm going to perform the same action again, but if I now check this, it's still psales1, and the package that I'm going to assign this object to is going to be a dependent one. The same action again, where I save, and this time around I have no validity issues because the model definition looks good. If I go now to the packages, and if I open this package for edit, I'll see that the result is that the object has been added and there are no validation issues. This is mainly because even though a modeler adds objects to a repository package, it is the responsibility of an administrator to define the dependencies between packages, and it is not the responsibility of the modeler themselves. The modeler, after they add an object to the package, and if the dependency is not resolved, they have two ways. Either the administrator can create the dependency through the required packages association, or they can remove the model from the existing package and remap it or reassociate it with a package that is going to resolve the dependency. That brings me to the end of my demo.
Hello and welcome also from my side. My name is Florian Neukirch and today I want to show you a cool enhancement we did for our data maintenance topics. When you're in a when you're looking at a local table and you go to the data editor there, you can find a new cool option to manipulate the data you are looking at. With the find and replace, it is now very easy to exchange certain values there. For example, if you have some null values or empty fields in your data set, you can now simply replace them with other values, whatever you want to do there. Or if you see that in your data there are spelling mistakes and you want to get rid of them, you can simply type that in our UI and say, okay, replace this value with another one. And with that, it is now very easy to go through your data and change minor mistakes there without a need to change the whole data set, but you can go in, hit a button and have a very easy user experience there, similar like you are used to maybe from other tools like, for example, Excel. And to show you how this looks like in the system, I already prepared a small data set we call it webshop sales, and there are different values in there, but when we take a look, for example, at the city, we see, okay, Hamburg doesn't seem right because the region is Hamburg, so there might be a mistake. So what I'm doing now is I hit find and replace and say, hey, please find the text Hamburg in my data set and replace it with Hamburg with the right term there. I want to say that this should match the case, and I have a occurrence count here to show me directly how many values I will manipulate there. And I hit the replace button, and now the SQL will run in the background. And the system will ask me if I'm really sure that I want to do that action now. And as soon as I hit confirm, the system will take care for the rest. And we can see in a second that now there is the right term Hamburg in. But I can do other examples as well. For example, I can go in there and say, hey, for the city Graz, I want to enter null values maybe. And I can do the same action that I did for the final replace before. Replace. And then we have empty strings there. I can do revert that, of course, and I can say, hey, these null values, please change them again back to Graz. And again, the system will take care for the rest. And yeah, as soon as this is executed, everything is reverted basically. Here we go. Yep, and with this feature, as said, there are multiple use cases now possible to really easily manipulate the data you're in. Since the release 2024-03, we have the delete, list, and read commands available for data builder and business builder objects. With that, we took the first step on our journey to enable the full CRUB operations via the command line interface API. And yeah, since now you are able to work with local or remote tables, graphical or SQL views, analytic models, data flows, whatsoever. You can see the full list here on that slide. And with that, you can get rid of repetitive tasks. You can automate stuff also in the context of the data layer or the business layer. The next step with the create and update will follow in Wave 2024-06. And if you're interested in learning on CLI in general, you can visit npmnjs.com or go to one of the blogs we already have written about this topic here. Let's take a look on how this looks in reality. So I'm already logged in a Datasphere tenant via the CLI, and I can see the now available commands, and under objects I can find now all the objects I can work with from the business layer and the data layer. So let's take a look. Here you get an extensive list, and let's say we want to take a look at the local tables or the commands that are available there. I simply have to type in objects, local table, and the H command. And here you can see that the available commands are list, read, and delete. So maybe let's get a list of all the local tables that are available in a space. So I type in the command, provide a value for my space ID, and then the system generates me a list of all the local tables that are available in that space. And let's say we want to read one of these tables. As can use the read command, put in the same value for the space ID, and let's say I want to take a look at the local table called city. And now I got a JSON back containing a season document describing exactly that table. Of course, it's also possible to store this JSON document locally. So I simply have to give it a name like this, paste in the same credentials for space ID, and let's say again city. And now the system created me a file containing the exact same JSON or season document. And yeah, that's all from my side, and back to you.
This next topic is quite important, especially for administrators and people who work with users and their roles. This is a new screen which now gives an overview of the permissions granted to certain people and scopes assigned to those users, which was not there before. And maybe that you get a better view, let's have a look at the system. So you find this view here under the security tab in the menu. There is a new entry called authorization overview, and then you get to this type of screen with a filter bar on the left where you can filter by users, scopes, or roles, and on the right hand side you then see the result of your settings. And that's already about it. So quite neat and cool feature. It's the same kind of control as used in other lists like the data builder or the repository explorer, with the usual filter and select column settings you're already aware of. The next feature we delivered in the area of data access controls, which is extending those data access controls in two ways. On the one hand side, support for Boolean operators. That means you can now create really powerful data access controls in which criteria are defined as operator and value pairs. So in other words, you can now use wildcards and range intervals and combine them with complex and or combinations to build very detailed row-level security. And as I said, what we also added here is the support for hierarchies and hierarchy values there. So these are really cool features to help you use Datasphere way more efficiently, but let's have a look at the system. So looking at the system, we have multiple of these DACs prepared here. Let's look into a Boolean one first. So what you see here is that there are, apart from single values, also operator and value pair settings as a structure. This has already been done. There's like always a permission entity, and then you see below here a little more complex structure with different fields where you can restrict certain columns, where you have a criterion, where you have an operator column, a lower and upper value for value ranges, etc. So that's where you can really set up quite detailed and quite complex data access controls. Similarly, if we change over to another new introduced version based on hierarchies, similarly here there's a structure setting called hierarchy. Again, permission entity needs to be selected. Then you have a business name and the selected hierarchy entity, which you then use to get the values for your row level security. The next topic is about the business content update, and over to Guido.
Let me give you an update of the business content that we released in Q1 2024 for SAP Datasphere. Before I come to the new packages and the enhancements, let me please again quickly highlight the value of the business content. The business content is really a jumpstart for your analytics, right? It's there to not start on a blank slate, but already use pre-configured data models that tap into the SAP systems and thus benefit of the integration that's already modeled there. As such, it speeds up any implementation, so it reduces the implementation times and the costs at the end. Also, you will find the best practices in the content, so it's really a good starting point for any analytics in your company. As we typically always deliver a visualization in SAP Analytics Cloud with the Datasphere content, you will, in particular, in all recent content releases, see that we use always the latest functionalities to provide you the best benefit of the content and also of the available technology. Now let me summarize the new packages and enhancement for the Q1 release. So the enterprise asset management was the heated plant maintenance scenario for SAP S/4HANA and S/4HANA Cloud was enhanced. Secondly, we enhanced the quality management content, and the Subsignavio process insights content also got some significant enhancement. Next to that, we benefited of new tech functionality for master data and here hierarchies for the GL account and the cost center have been added to the existing Finance Foundation and Working Capital content package. We also are happy to announce that Datasphere documentation is now also finally available in the SAP Help portal. Let me also mention our community content here, which is enhancing the existing content offering. To deep dive into any of the new content packages, but also of all content packages, you find here links to relevant pages. Foremost, the documentation, the community page, but also a direct link here to the community content GitHub. Now let's see what has been enhanced in the packages. Let's start with the Enterprise Asset Management package, Plant Maintenance Analysis for SAP S/4HANA and S/4HANA Cloud. Here we focus to enhance the topic of costs. So with the new update, you can get insights into maintenance costs based on baseline, planned, actual, and estimated costs. Thus, you are now able to also visualize and analyze maintenance order operations per work center and plant. In the SAP Signavio Process Insights package, we enhanced the scenario auto rate overview with detailed analysis, and here for source to pay, lead to cash, and the make to inspect scenario. On the lower right corner, you see the overview page with each automation rate, and for each rate, we have a detailed page for further analysis. This is quite a powerful enhancement. Lastly, the sub-quality management scenario or content package here was enhanced based on feedback. We improved here the access to the data to make it easier. Let me here give you an overview of all available packages as of Q1 2024. The new release packages are highlighted here. The second highlighting show you our so-named, so-called Datasphere Content Foundation packages, which really serve as a foundation for those areas here. In particular, the foundation packages are currently available for the Enterprise Asset Management Plant Maintenance scenario here, for finance, for the sales area, for you to start your analytics journey. Thank you, and if you have any feedback or further questions, please also reach out to our content mailbox.
So as promised at the beginning, we will also take a look forward. So looking on future developments we're currently planning or developing for the next quarters. So if we look at the first features here, we have Confluent Kafka as a specific version of the Apache Kafka connector planned for Q2. So first as a target that will hopefully come very soon, and then later in Q3 we plan that Confluent Kafka connection to be also available as a source for replication flows. Speaking of replication flows, we plan on be able to schedule replication flows, also use cloud object stores as a source, not only as a target, while enable also flexible scalability options there with replication flows, and also further enhancing the delta capabilities here, delta capture as a source in replication flows with delta and initial load support there. That will come also in multiple steps as multiple deliveries over time. Then we will enhance the CLI in various ways. So you saw in today's session already the CRUD operations, which we started to put into the CLI. We will enhance that for the data builder and business layer objects. Also on the data marketplace side, we will be able to provide license-specific data selection via the CLI. Another part will be on the security side, offering a SCIM API. And on the analytical model side and the views, we will also enhance the OData API for direct access from those model editors. So very good enhancements planned there. Then if we move on further on the modeling side, We plan to deliver what we call compatibility contracts. That's very important for lifecycle management of your models, because for some of those models, you want to ensure that there are no incompatible changes, meaning someone makes a change and then your analytics on top might break. So you could then introduce those compatibility contracts who would avoid making those incompatible changes. So you have a stability in your end-to-end model and reporting layer. That's very useful in various cases. Another topic we want to introduce is namespaces for the modeling entities, that you have an additional means to be able to group different modeling artifacts. As well, we want to enhance the catalog. As a first enhancement, what's planned there is metadata extraction for the BW bridge, which is an optional component already of SAP Datasphere, and to be able to add that to the catalog. Then a story which is more on the SAP Analytics Cloud side, but story repointing is planned currently for the Q2 release of SAP Analytics Cloud. That would then also affect the analytic model, being able to repoint or exchange models here for those stories. Another big topic specifically for BW customers and BW community is the topic of non-cumulative key figures, so usually used in HR or warehousing scenarios with stock levels, etc. That kind of functionality is planned for Q2. Another important one is what we call multilingual content support, meaning that you will be able then to translate also metadata. Today you can also already translate a lot of various things like dimension attributes, descriptions there, etc., but not like column names or these type of things that will come with this multilingual content support package, also planned for Q2. And then further on, we plan to deliver more on-demand compute capabilities to be able to cover peak consumption scenarios without having to increase the full size of your tenant. We're expanding our data center coverage, as you saw early today, with Google Cloud Platform and Azure to further data centers. That's not only Q2, but also going forward. Then additional topics on the data marketplace. Semantic onboarding will be extended, specifically providing support around HANA Cloud calculation views. That's planned for later this year. Stacking of analytic models is another important topic we're working on, and hopefully have that somewhere in Q3 available. Also the support for like display navigational attribute, that kind of concept known also from the BW world, is on our list there. Later in the year, or maybe also next year, is multi-fact modeling, also for the analytic model, and also business layer support there. And last but not least, I mentioned already, catalog will be expanded, crawling capabilities Q2 for the BW bridge. Then later in the year, we plan on additional sources like BW, S4HANA, ECC, and SAP HANA. Some of those might also get only into the system coming next year. And last but not least, Gen AI capabilities will be added going forward. What's already there is support through SAP Analytics Cloud and the Just Ask component. If models are based on SAP Datasphere, that's already there. We plan further enhancements also in the area of automated modeling, helping there, creating models and accelerating the modeling capabilities. So stay tuned there. That will be quite interesting. And with that, we're at the end of our core part here, and I would like to thank all the speakers for preparing the content